Hey, Miles.
I thought you were in Mexico.
No, I'm going to Mexico in 2 weeks.
Okay.
He was in Alaska.
I was in Alaska.
Can't you see
Tan.
glow?
Mr. Freeman, we're ready to go.
All right. Mike's got the clock covered out there, but I think that it's 9 o'clock, and it is. So we'll call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Brandon Holmes for Sheriff Tommy Johnson III.
Rick Warren.
Marissa Treat.
Joe Blau for Kerry Bloomer.
Jessica Clayton for County Commissioner Mon.
Butch Freeman.
Miles Davidson.
Marcy Hoffman for Larry Stein.
All right, seeing that we got a quorum, notice this meeting was properly posted on August 22nd. Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Rick?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is approval of minutes from the meeting of August 15th, 2024.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. They are approved.
Mr. Warren, thank you, sir.
Item number, and I keep forgetting to hit all this stuff. We good? Yeah, okay. All right, now, in the departmental items, item number 2 has to do with a resolution in a transfer of funds between Oklahoma County Detention Center and team.
I'll be
And
happy to.
That's gonna, and we're about to ask Miss Jessica to tell us what the H is going on.
Yes, I'll be happy to discuss this item. So a little history on this. So we worked collaboratively in regards to moving court services from a county department into MOUs with other entities in order to handle the supervision of pretrial services or bond employees, moving so on and so forth. So what that looked like in the end, we ended up doing 4 contracts for court services. The first contract was with the detention center for 4 employees. That amount is $145,200, and that is for benefits and salaries in order for them to report to Brandy at the detention center for those services. Then we ended up moving 1 employee to the DA in order to do specialized GPS monitoring and supervision at the request of the DA. That employee now reports to her. And so that amount is $73,919.45. So those are 2 contracts. The third contract was with Team. And through many long conversations in regards to what that looks like, unfortunately, we received all these contracts. The detention center actually went across the jail trust before we even saw it. But we received all these contracts at the Horseshoe. The budget was provided to us, and Chris and Jamie are here today to answer any questions in regards to the services rendered and what they're doing and the numbers since we've signed these contracts. But whenever I went to set up the requisitioning and receiving officers, and in order to pay their first invoice, unfortunately, we realized that we overextended ourselves regarding what was available in the budget. One, because benefits and salaries were moved out whenever those discussions were made last year, and 2, simply there isn't enough funds, and so we would need to discuss further at September supplemental in regards to what that looks like. Now, I believe that there are a lot of discussions that we need to continue to have. We received the budget from Jamie and Chris really on the Horseshoe, and so I have had meetings with them, as well as Cody has had meetings with them from D1. And I have met with our public defender, Bridget Biffle, who was going to be here today, in order to look over the services rendered and talk through what that looks like, and to make sure that we're not double dipping into 781 funding. And so we'll continue to have those conversations regarding the invoice that needs to be paid. And then at September supplemental, we will need to talk further about what this looks like moving forward. But in order for us to be able to pay the detention center, the DA, and team, we will have to encumber the entire amount of those funds and to be able to pay those invoices. Typically, before I would have put a contract across the agenda, I would have had Kelly Thomas do a requisition and we would have made sure those funds were encumbered before it went across the agenda. But since they were received at the Horseshoe, that did not happen in a proper way. And it was simply due to how fast we were trying to move to get this done, due to a lot of factors. So what we ended up doing is on the agenda for tomorrow is a revised contract for team for 6 months. It is half of the $1,350,914.94. So it's half that amount. That is for 6 months, so that way we can at least pay them for invoices received towards salaries and benefits and discuss some of the other things that are on there as well. But that is on the agenda for tomorrow for approval, and simply what needs to be approved for today, and then I welcome all the questions, is we need to be able to move the funds out of salaries and benefits in that court services fund into M&O, so that way we can pay all of the MOUs that we will be receiving invoices for, which is half of what was contracted with an agreement with team, the full amount for the detention center, and the full amount for the DA.
Okay, you've heard the presentation. Are there any further questions?
Do we have a copy of the MOU invoices?
Those were not provided, but I can definitely provide those to all the teams.
Why did we not have BET vet this?
So this was, Cody, did we vet this in BET? I don't serve on BET, and so I don't have an answer for that.
And weren't we promised it's going to cost us less than what we were paying a department that we shut down? And
That-
it looks like it's going to be 25% more.
That is correct, and that was stated on the Horseshoe both by Chris Steele and what we had the understanding for, but Chris can speak to that as well if you're welcome to come up and talk about.
And Cody, it seems like from the jail and many other things we've been doing the last year, we're backing into numbers. I think that's a big mistake. That's not the way to run a business, is backing into numbers. We need to know the numbers up front. It needs to be vetted. Everything needs to be done in a proper way so that we're good stewards of the county taxpayers' money.
To answer the initial question, BET did not address this situation because this was a BOCC department, and the contracts with the MOUs and everything had specifically to do with BOCC deciding that they wanted to go a different direction. As Jessica mentioned, the thought was that those costs were going to be in line or less than what we had budgeted for BOCC to run it themselves versus running it through MOUs. That, in hindsight, turned out to be a little bit of an issue. So BET does need to have some conversations. As it relates to this specific item before you today, BET normally does not address these issues as they relate to transfers specifically within a budget that was already allocated by budget board. So if you have your budget and then sometime during the year you need to move money from one line item to another, whether it's to fall within the 90% rule or because you have unexpected expenses, those traditionally just come straight to budget board. BET, if budget board wants us to vet those, that's something that we could do in the future, but we've never done that. Those just come straight here, and that's all this item today is. It's not about allocating any additional funds or anything. It's just moving it within that account, because even if the funds were, if we had enough money and we weren't going to have BET conversations about maybe putting more money in, we would still need to be here today, because all the money, when we set it up in court services to start the year, those funds are in salaries and benefits. They paid their M&O out of some of their special funds. So with all this money being in salary and benefits, you can't pay contracts out of salary and benefits. It has to be in M&O. So it's just reallocating those funds within that budget into M&O so that we can write checks out of that M&O account instead of salary and benefits. So like I said, if there wasn't a miscalculation there, we would still be here today needing to move it into M&O, but we are going to have some other conversations.
Well, I understand all that, but this isn't the norm, and we keep doing this. And basically, you're saying that it's just moving money. But what's going to happen is then they're going to come back to the budget board, because we are a budget board county, and it's going to have to be more money, about 25% more, and they're going to need more funds. And if we did that to every department in the county, we couldn't afford it. Right now, we can't hardly afford what we're doing. So I think something like this needs to be vetted.
Chris, do you have anything else
No.
to add, Cody? Thank you for that clarification. Chris, would you like to join us on the podium? I wanted to give Chris an opportunity, who's the CEO of Team, to discuss with the budget board what services are being provided with this contract, especially since we'll be discussing this moving forward in BET. There have been, just from our previous conversations, there have been a lot of increase in the services rendered, and you could definitely, I would welcome you to speak to that. But there are, just in full transparency, on the mic, there are items on here that were above and beyond the services that were currently provided by court services, from what I understand, in my limited knowledge of all the detailed things that they did. And so you might also speak to why those were included in this budget, since you have everyone's attention.
Love it. Yeah.
Thank
you. And thank you so much for the opportunity to address the budget board this morning. I would first of all want you to know that we want to be 100% transparency. We would love for you guys to review our invoices, to know exactly what the budget is, what the expenditures are going for, right down to the last penny. I would tell you that as of today, pretrial services is currently supervising 726 individuals. It's important to know that from a per participant standpoint, this is a much better return on investment. When we took over, court services was actively supervising 40 individuals on conditional bond, not OR bonds, which don't require any supervision, but on conditional bonds. We are today serving 726 individuals on conditional bond. The array of services is much more comprehensive. It's deep. The advisory committee that oversees the pretrial services in Oklahoma County, Judge Stoner, DA Bahena, Bridget Biffle, and all the folk have strongly encouraged us. They said it's always been a goal for Oklahoma County to have a pretrial service that is in accordance with national standards and best practices, to be nationally certified as a provider that adheres to best practices. We are doing that. We've got the certification. Our leaders are certified in best practices, and we are hitting all the benchmarks to be compliant with a best practices pretrial services. This will be a national model, but with that comes adherence to appropriate caseload to case manager ratios. We can't have more people than we can actively supervise and provide adequate supervision for. We have to keep our caseloads within the standards for national practices. We have to offer incentives when people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. We're not offering fluff incentives, but we are offering bus passes and some incentives that would help them continue to be compliant so long as they're making an effort and doing what they need to be doing. The other thing that you're going to see in our invoice is the cost for our MIS system, so that at any given time, in any given moment, anybody can contact us and say, hey, we want to know exactly where we're at, who we're supervising, and where a person may be in relation to their court conditions. The MIS system that we have obtained is called Salesforce. It is said to be the best in the business as far as managing data and providing information and the related reports to the courts, to the district attorney, and to the powers that be. That costs money. And so ultimately, when you account for the fact that we're paying for an MIS system, we have incorporated incentives by the way of bus passes to make sure that people continue to move forward, and that we are adhering to best practices in keeping our caseloads at a ratio that is in accordance with best practices. When you consider that we're now serving nearly over 600 times the number of people that we were serving in this same program for the same, virtually the same amount of money. The cost per participant is pennies on the dollar.
You mentioned bus passes. Excuse me. You mentioned bus passes twice.
Mhm.
Are they ever donated to you?
So what we do, we always look for, and this is not nearly all of. So it's costing, and I would want to be clear that in addition to this contract, we are also through private dollars adding $425,000 to this contract, to these services, so that we can help individuals who are completely indigent with housing, with employment assistance, and with all the other direct services that they would need to be successful, things that aren't eligible to be billed in this contract, we're still providing those services through our nonprofit and through private donations. But on the notion of bus passes, I mentioned that to tell you that that is the incentives that we are giving. We're not giving anything other than those incentives. And when we buy our bus passes, we always purchase them in bulk at a time when they're half off. We get the best deal that we can. We also ask for donations for any bus passes that we can get donated for us.
Is the county being billed? Don't mean to interrupt you, but
Yes,
is
sir.
the county being billed for bus passes?
The bus passes are that we provided for the participants since we started serving as incentives are in this invoice.
And what about the
and-
ones that are donated?
Yeah, we just add them all together. We're just charging for those that we had to pay for.
So, and I apologize, the invoice that's still in question, that's the reason why, I guess I should have added to the agenda item. The budget, that is presented by team is $30,000 for incentives. And the invoice that, we recently have received is $9,000, which is 1,200 bus passes. And I believe that that is for 6 months, correct?
I think it's for 3
That
months.
Jamie's nodding her head from an
Was
email.
it 6 months?
So we're still having these discussions in regards to this invoice to see, even maybe if there's other ways for us to be able to fund it, maybe through our opioid settlements or other funding that helps with incentives and for diversion. That's something that we're having ongoing conversations so that way we can eliminate some of these one-time costs. But it's not something that we offered before, from what I'm understanding. And so that is part of all of our concern in regards to transferring court services department from one entity to the next.
Uh,
What did you
We
say?
did offer that before.
Oh, we did?
Yeah, we
$30,000 in
We offered
incentives?
bus passes. We got them for free.
But,
We
okay,
handed them
yeah,
out for free.
the $30,000 in incentives, but yeah, you're telling me.
The bus pass part of it
Was free.
100%. Absolutely, we got them and we handed them out.
So I would just say, and again, thank you for the conversation. You've got to have incentives to obtain the national best practice accreditation. You can't just punish bad behavior. You got to reward good behavior. That's all part of, and so we're kind of in this quandary. I promise you, this is a much better return on investment per person, per participant, and you're going to be proud of the outcomes. But the dilemma is this, being given the directive to achieve this national standard accreditation and then knowing what it takes to be able to achieve that status. Like the program has never had that certification before. I'm not looking back, I'm not being critical. It is what it is. But moving forward, as we've been given the directive to take the services offered in Oklahoma County to the next level, even at a time when our jail intakes are also increasing to keep our jail population where it should be and promote community safety, we feel like that we are doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing with the resources that we understood would be allocated for this initiative. We're trying to maximize every dollar.
You say you understood that we were going to allocate, but what was promised, what I heard said many times, because I'm on those committees, is it's going to cost us less, 25% more.
Well,
It's a
it is
huge
less
amount.
per
It's a
person, much less per person. Supervising 40 as opposed to
And our jail
726
population
for
is
the same
almost
amount of money.
1,600 now.
I know.
How
That's
did you, I'm glad you brought those numbers up again because you did it earlier in your presentation, the 40 to 730. How in the hell did you go from 40 to 736?
We secured the release and working with the processes that are in place that could have been taken place all along. We secured the release of 226 individuals in the month of August alone. And
That we could have, but we weren't? Is that what you're
yes,
telling
sir,
me?
that's exactly what I'm telling you.
So what court services did typically was between 100 and 150 a month on that same program, and they were monitoring. Joe, you could remind me about this. It was like 500 some odd that they reported that they were continuously monitoring. Mr. Warren, you're also on those committees.
Yes.
You can probably speak to this as well. So, and then how many of that? I mean, if you got 225 out and you're managing 640, that tells me that you took over 400 from court services when you took it over. Is that correct?
We were supervising about 400 individuals that should have been supervised through court services when we took the program over.
So what did you get from court services?
We got about 40.
So you say you're supervising, what level are you? Are they wearing ankle monitors?
Some are. Some are.
Some are. So out of the 400, is 300 of them wearing ankle monitors?
Not that many.
Mr. Speaker, on this numbers issue, your program was getting people out of jail that you say court services could have been monitoring. The judges were electing to utilize you all rather than court services, correct? And to Miles's question, that number would be included in this aggregate total now, correct?
That's correct. They could have been supervised through court services. There was not a level of advocacy to have them supervised through court services. So we would advocate to be able to provide these
Right.
services.
So-
We came into existence when we realized that there were people sitting in Oklahoma County Jail who shouldn't be there, who were being left there because there wasn't an interest to really work to get them out. So we started.
But only the judges could determine who was released, so
Mhm.
they elected not to utilize our department.
Well, they elected to not utilize the department because they didn't feel like the higher level of comprehensive services were available.
And then Miles, to your point, the numbers, I hadn't been to a criminal justice meeting where Tardy Bono was making his report. But when Grant was reporting those totals, however they were OR, conditional, whatever that number was, seemed to be in the 400 ranges, as I recall.
Yeah, there were a couple of hundred on OR, but there's no level of supervision. If you're on OR, you're on your own recognizance.
Correct.
Only those that were on a conditional bond were 40 when we took over.
As far as ORs, you keep bringing that up. Is there less people getting OR now, or is it about the same as it always been? Our judges are still working hard, so we're trying to get the people out of jail that didn't have to be there.
That's right.
So right now, is the number pretty much equal ORs, other than you are watching some of them, you're monitoring some of them?
We're monitoring more than have been monitored in any
But the
records that we
ORs have not
access to.
decreased. They've actually still been about the same, right? The amount of judges, our judges are hearing about the same number of cases.
I would say that's right. But the number of intakes in the jail is up. We're getting more people processed in the jail. So the need for these services are at a critical moment, obviously.
And I was going to ask you a question to that point. So if previously we were monitoring 40 and now you're monitoring 700, why is that number not reflected in the jail population? Is crime higher? I mean, because both
No.
of those I don't think can be mutual.
So the point is this: we were supervising individuals who should have been supervised by court services prior to us officially taking over the court services. Now, when we put those in the aggregate, we're seeing an increase in the number that we're supervising on OR bonds right across the board. The other thing that was directed to us is that we create a single streamlined process for everyone who qualifies for conditional bond, and that we provide adequate services to meet that individual's needs. So we streamline the process. There is one pretrial conditional bond service in Oklahoma County now. We streamline that services, and that's also why we're seeing the increase in the number of people that we're able to secure a release for in this past month. It's all coming together now.
So why do you suppose that we're not seeing a reduction in the jail population when you're saying, like you said, 600% more? Or
Well, I will tell you that it's because more people are being processed into the jail than they were at this time last year. And to be fair, the transition early on, the first couple of weeks, first 3 or 4 weeks were starts, and I mean, the month of July was pretty tough. We were still trying to get people situated. We were still trying to get people accredited in court services as they moved over to the jail trust and work out the process for reviewing and setting up the interviews and all that. So that month of July, we didn't get as many people out as we have this month. So we're making up for lost time. And I suspect in short order, you're going to see the jail population go back down to where it was, or if not lower, in short order.
So if once those couple hundred are released to get that jail population back down, would your numbers then go from 40 to 900 that you'd be monitoring?
I mean, we're going to continue to get people out, but as we get people out, just so we're clear, and thank you for the question, we stay with a person until their case is disposed, meaning it's pre-trial, right? So we stay with them, make sure they're doing what they need to be doing. If they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, we report that to the appropriate officials. But once their case is disposed, once the courts decide what they're going to do with that individual, they're no longer on our caseload. So every month we're going to have a number of people that are going to rotate off as we take on more. So I suspect that we're going to hit an average, and it'll be determined, but we're ramping up to provide supervision somewhere between 800, 850 for the year.
So the more you monitor, the more the charge will be to the county, right? Is that correct?
No, sir. The contract, we have to keep caseloads in compliance. We can't have a caseload of 200, obviously, because we wouldn't be able to provide adequate supervision. But what we have prepared for, based on looking at the trends and the numbers and everything, is this budget that has been submitted and signed, to make sure that we have the adequate number of pretrial case managers to provide proper supervision for the number of people that we anticipate will have a need for this service over the next 12 months.
So yes.
No, well,
The answer is yes. So your goal is, this is the exact opposite of private prisons. The more people in there, the more they get paid. The more people you get out, the more you get paid, because you just said it yourself. As you increase your workload, you have to add staff. In order for you to add staff, you have to come back to us and ask for money, correct?
what I'm
It's a
saying,
yes or no, real easy.
no, because here's what we've
Okay,
done.
so the contract's not gonna go up as your workload goes up. Is that what you're
Not
telling
for
me?
the next 12 months.
Okay,
Um,
and then after that, you're gonna increase the contract the next year, because it's gonna be a new contract negotiation, and you're gonna
Sure.
have to increase your workload.
I don't
and
know
you
if
have
we're going to
offset
increase
that
it or
cost,
not.
correct?
What I'm saying to you, Commissioner, is for this next 12 months, we built this budget based on the number of case managers that we anticipate we will need, based on what we see the population to be for the next 12 months. We understand that as we take on new people, as we secure the release of additional people, individuals existing on a caseload will transition off because their court dates will come up. And so we anticipate that over the next 12 months, we will be actively supervising between 800 and 850 individuals each month. That's what this county, based on the population in the jail for the past couple of years, would indicate. That's what we built the budget on. We have everyone in staff to be able to provide adequate supervision for those numbers for the next 12 months. We're going to continue to monitor. I mean, it would be the best of all worlds if our jail population decreased in Oklahoma County, because we were getting people to mental health services and substance abuse services and wherever they needed to be prior to going to jail. So if our jail population goes down, the budget may go down. If the jail population goes up, the budget may go up. I don't have a crystal ball to dictate that. I can just tell you that we built the budget based on the trends for this 12 months.
And what you said at the very beginning is very vital to that.
Okay,
Bookings have increased.
right.
Bookings will continue to increase.
I hope not.
Criminal justice reform is a pendulum. Is it not? When you were in the legislature, it was a lock them up, throw away the key. Before that, it was where we're at today. And what you're seeing now, not only in presidential election, but in elections that we're facing on a local basis, is criminal justice has gone too far. We need to start reforming some of the reforms.
Yeah,
You're seeing it on the campaigns, you're seeing it on the doorstep. So we're starting to see that swing come back. Our population is showing it. Your workload is going to increase.
If it increases,
Our population's
we
increasing.
will come to you and have that discussion, and you can decide what you want to do with that. Commissioner, I respectfully disagree with your premise. I think that in this county, I've never been more excited. To Mr. Warren's point, the judges that we have on the Oklahoma County bench get it. I mean, for the most part, they get it. They are looking for ways to place people in diversion programs rather than detainment. This county and this state is investing in mental health infrastructure like never before. We have programs in place to add new crisis centers, new treatment centers, and that's where the focus is going. So I would just say that we are twice as smart as we have ever been on crime. That's where we're at in this county. The leadership in this county at this moment gives me all kinds of hope that we're going to continue to see responsible and reasonable action taken to people who legitimately need help versus those who pose a danger to the community. And when we do that, I believe that our jail population will decrease. I really think that's the trend we're on.
So do we see mental health and behavioral health and rehabilitative services and all the programming? Do you see that as being a condition of a CB,
Condition of what?
a conditional bond,
Um,
which you would be managing, correct? So as the more people that we shove off into these conditions, the more people we're going to have a conditional bond, correct?
So what I'm saying to you is this, that if a person after they're arrested and detained into the Oklahoma County Detention Center is given an assessment and it is determined that they are required to participate in treatment or mental health services, that is a condition that we oversee. But I believe we're getting to the point where there is coordinated efforts that's going to take that individual at the point of need directly to a mental health center and or a treatment center. And if we can avoid arrest and entrance into the jail center, we won't be a part of that. So as we grow in our infrastructure and in our understanding and our ability to get people where they need to be, I hope and I pray that there is a decrease in our Oklahoma County jail. Until that time, we're going to make sure that we provide the best supervision and services necessary to achieve the outcomes that would make each one of you proud.
Any further questions? Okay. Is the horse dead yet? Have we beat it to death?
No,
I think we
I
have.
love the conversation.
I know you do.
This is right where we need to be. This is good for our county and Mr. Freed, and to be able to streamline and create a best practices model that could serve as a bright spot for the nation and for other states is just as exciting as it gets.
And
Okay.
he's absolutely right. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with the program. What we have to understand, the more programming we offer, the more expensive it gets for us. That is the point here. It's no knock on what they're doing. It's no knock on how they're doing it. You have to understand there is a cost of incarceration. There's a cost of diversion. We don't have the money now, and we have to figure this out.
But Commissioner, as a department, our cost was controlled. Now that we
Well, it
put it
was
into
like-
the
yeah.
private sector, it went up 25% when we
Right.
promised in meetings that it was gonna drop.
Yeah, you're
That concerns me a lot. And then we talk about how many people are getting out of jail. The same amount, equal number based on percentages are still getting out. Our judges are still ORing. Whether they're going into programs or not, they're still getting OR'd. Judge Tron's over every weekend working, so several of the other judges. So my concern here is we're on a limited budget. And when we start talking about increasing one area 25%, when we start doing everybody 25%, we can't afford it. We'll bankrupt the county.
So, Jessica, did you say, I've been gone, so, and Cody's done a good
This
job
is
of trying
first
to.
day back. Welcome back, Joe.
Thank you. Done a good job trying to catch me up. But you said that the board is going to consider a 6-month contract,
Correct.
okay? And my assumption would be that in this intervening period, that we're going to have some discussions over these issues that the budget board members have raised with regard to the cost. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, we've had those conversations and we'll continue to have those conversations in BET.
Okay.
The 6-month contract running when to when?
The 6-month contract is from when it's an amendment to the existing contract. That is on the agenda for BOCC tomorrow. The amount, sorry. The amount of that contract is, sorry, the term, your question is from July 1st to December 31st of 2024 for 6 months. The amount is half of what was presented for their budget, which is $675,457.47. That just allows us to be able to encumber the contract, which is required, and be able, today, we are moving those funds that we would have to move anyways, as Cody mentioned, into an account so that way we can pay their invoices until we talk further about the next 6 months or these invoices as a whole, and also be able to pay the detention center for their MOU. Does that answer your question?
Any further questions or comments? What type of action do we want to take on this? Just to receive the information? Is there anything that you're looking for us to approve on here?
I'm looking for you to approve the transfer of funds so that way we can be able to pay the invoices. Maybe we can continue to have discussions regarding this invoice for anyone that has questions, the one that team has presented for July, but we do need to pay those employees. They need these funds to pay the salaries of those that they've hired in order to perform these services and the services rendered. And then we also need the funds in that account to be able to pay the detention MOU for their 4 employees' salaries. So
Okay.
this is
Is
people's,
that your motion?
yes, that we,
I'll second.
I'll make the motion. The motion is to proceed with the transfer of funds from salaries 1001301 in the amount of $747,649.07 and benefits from 1001301 in the amount of $139,784.05 to MOU 1001301 in the amount not to exceed $877,433.12. This will be able to encumber the funds for the detention center in the amount of $145,200, and then be able to continue to look at that invoice and have discussions in BET and be able to possibly find other ways to fund incentives at policy and governance, but to be able to pay those invoices so their employees will be able to be paid.
Just real quick, can I ask one more question of Mr. Steele? What are these incentives? Can you give 5 examples of what the incentives are?
Right now, they're bus passes.
Okay. What do you want them to be?
We're sticking with, but we've only given bus passes as incentives in this program to date, because we want whatever incentive we give at this point to be something that's going to help that person continue to be compliant. I can tell you in other programs, the incentives, the best practice model would be anything that is pro-social and keeps that person connected in the community. It could be tickets to the zoo with their family if they have a family. It could be a trip to the bowling alley with their family, anything of that nature. We're not doing any of that. Let me just be clear. We've only focused on bus passes at this point.
I will also add, just since I have the opportunity, in order to bring all this conversation, I'll provide the documentation, but this conversation, Chris, you'll have to speak to this. I'm sorry. Please join us again. Previously, because I feel like it's important to mention, previously and you'll have to help me a little, but with our court-ordered GPS monitoring, court services billed the participants for some of the participants for the use of that GPS monitoring. Your practice moving forward, so we had revenue coming into a special fund. Your practice moving forward is that you do not pass that fee along. And so I just want to make sure that we're really clear that this contract moving forward covers the costs, since we will not have that revenue coming into a special fund, that your contract covers the cost of any indigent GPS monitoring or court-ordered monitoring under your care.
Correct. So thank you for bringing that up. The reality is I have no idea how much, if any, of those funds were actually collected, but I would just tell you, by virtue of needing a conditional bond in this program, the individual cannot afford to make their bond. They're indigent by virtue of being in this program. And the best practice would say that you cannot financially penalize a person who doesn't have the money in relation to fulfilling a court order. If the court says, Chris, I have to go do this, then you should give me the opportunity to do that and not make it impossible for me to do that because I can't afford to do what the court has told me to do. And then the second part of that, Jessica, is that in the past, when the county had the program, you all had a special account. Commissioner, you and I had talked about this account. It was account for indigent people that you all used to pay for this service out of that account. We don't have access to that account, so we're billing for those same exact services in the actual contract, and that's in the interest of full transparency.
So
And-
that account
and-
every year, Cody, remind me, $50,000 is what we put into it, and the first couple of times it took multiple years to use.
At first, I think it was about the first 5 years to go through 50.
So what do we think we're going to go through in year one?
Well,
Since we're putting everybody on ankle monitors
We're not-
and we're not asking them to pay for them, what are we going to pay for in the future?
we're not putting everybody on ankle monitors. Only individuals that the court orders to be on ankle monitors are on ankle monitors. And as Cody just said, the county used the entire 50,000 the past several years. So we anticipate that we will utilize about 50,000. I mean, to keep on track with where you've been in the last several years, if those trends continue.
So we would use 50,000 for indigent, but that also had a bunch of individuals that were not considered indigent that were actually paying for their ankle monitors, of which you are no longer requiring them to pay for their ankle monitors, which means to me that you've already, while you're not passing that cost on, I believe is what we said, that
Right.
cost is being passed on. It's being passed on to the taxpayers and to the county.
What I'm telling you is if you were to charge for that service, number one, the person likely cannot afford it. Stand behind that. Number two, it would be a violation of best practices and not allow us to achieve the national certification that the board that supervises this program has directed us to achieve.
What is the national? You keep coming to this national certification. What does that do for the county? I mean, I mean, this is a national certification for you, for your organization.
And it's for Oklahoma County.
What does it do for the county?
So it's the same. It follows the same leadership model that Judge Stoner has achieved for drug court in Oklahoma County, the same model that Judge Burton is seeking to achieve for Dreams Court in Oklahoma County, the same model that Judge Dishman is seeking to achieve for Veteran Services Courts. It means that we are doing everything that we can according to research-based evidence to make sure that we are providing proper services and ensuring community safety. So what that does is it gives us the best chance of making sure that we have the kind of outcomes that you would want based on research, based on best practices, and based on proven models. We're just trying to follow in line with where this county is going to ensure community safety and effective services for individuals that have those needs.
And
I get that. So like ACA accreditation for a jail, that helps us with our insurance rates. That helps us financially. How does this help the county? I mean, I'm not,
I don't.
I'm worried about the bottom line. I don't know if you've read the news, but I've got a $650 to $700 million jail. Every penny counts. While I'm looking at a 25% increase in your contract, I've got to figure out how to raise $500 million, and every penny counts.
Commissioner, I
I
can
think
tell
we're all on that board.
Commissioner, I can tell you that the cost to having somebody on conditional bond versus having that person remain in jail is pennies on the dollar. It's so much more expensive to the county to have a person detained. And it's inhumane. Not only is it more expensive, it's inhumane to cage a person who doesn't need to be caged. And so what this best practice, what this national certification does is it promotes community safety in the county that you are elected to represent.
And I was just going to say one more thing. So in regards to your comment of that there was an additional fund for indigent GPS monitoring. I just want everyone to be clear that that's not an additional fund. That's part of the funds that are being rolled into what you're paying out on your budget that we're discussing today. Just want to make sure that's clear, that that's not some
100%
additional.
correct.
Okay.
So we don't have access to the $50,000 that was being utilized for this very same service. So we
It's all
put,
pulled
so we
in.
put that in the budget that we signed.
Thank you. I
with
just
the
wanted to clarify. I have no other comments.
All right, any further questions? We had a motion and a second to approve. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, please vote.
Aye.
No.
No.
Okay, motion fails.
What is the, again, I haven't seen the contract. What is our terms of payment?
Our terms of payment are monthly.
So net 30 days.
Correct.
So
Without a contract.
we have.
Well, we have one in place. We're just amending it
we-
tomorrow.
Yeah. So we have a contract. We have invoices that have been presented that we need to pay. And then the board will take up an amended contract tomorrow that they could have some flexibility in coming up with on additional terms.
Correct.
But if the board doesn't amend tomorrow's contract, my assumption would be we would have a contract that's in place.
Reverse that. Do we have a contract in place right this minute?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We just
So,
can't encumber it to pay the invoices.
we've got a contract, but we can't encumber it. I'm not
We don't have
following.
enough funds in
The
account.
money-
Oh, I see what
The
you're saying.
money's in salary and benefits, Butch, as opposed to the M&O. So that's why Commissioner Mon put this item on, was to get it down into M&O so that we can pay the contracts.
Well, so we're not at that position where we can then. And so your plans, incidentally, something that Rick Warren said a while ago, I'd like to go back and really emphasize. This is the reason the BET should be meeting and discussing this type of an item. The way it works in my office and the way it works in all 8 offices is my BET member then comes back and gives me a brief. Boss, this is what came up. Here were some of the questions. Here were some of the answers. So I've been totally caught cold by not having had that advantage of Christie and the BET having the opportunity to vet this. And I mean,
Is that your motion?
either way, yeah. Well, I'm just making this to go along with what Rick was saying. That's why the BET is so valuable to us.
Very much so.
We do need to consider, yeah, absolutely. We do need to consider that in order to pay the detention center, the $145,200, we need to move those funds regardless. That MOU is not in question. But we can't pay for their benefits and salaries without transferring funds.
Is that a new motion to move?
When you
That
started
is
though,
not
you
my
said
motion.
all these had to be done at the same time. You said this is one motion. So what has changed?
So we were moving the monies that were in salaries and benefits into M&O so that way we could pay both the team contract as well as the detention center MOU, those 2 MOUs, the invoices that are due for July and
I
August.
think you're gonna have to re-put it on and put that one on for the jail, because when you first started this number 2, you said all of them had to be paid or none. It's basically what I understood you to say it. Maybe I misunderstood you.
Is there an opportunity to have a new motion that just takes care of transferring funds, which I think was mentioned earlier? It is normal for us to transfer within a budget already approved, and probably speaking for myself, being a little bit uncomfortable with things that are outside of that at the moment. Is there an opportunity for us to, and I don't know exactly what that number is, but is there an option to do that so that we're able to just do a transfer?
I think we could, since it says not to exceed. I do have a question though, Jessica, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So with the detention center and then the extra person with the DA's office, those are within the original limits that we assumed were going to be. I guess what I'm getting at is where specifically is the increase, that $300,000 increase coming from?
In team.
Is it, it's specifically, okay.
Yeah, so the 145,000 is only for salaries and benefits, the same amount that was that we're paying for court services. We basically just transferred the supervision over to the detention center for 4 employees as well as to the DA. The DA's was a little bit higher because the state's benefits and were a little bit higher than what the county, of course, was, but not substantial. I mean, by not very much. And so, but correct me if I'm wrong, if we went ahead and made the transfer that needs to be made regardless, and Cody, if you want to speak to this, right now we cannot pay teams contract unless at BOCC we approve their 6-month new MOU. But if those funds are or after that, then we could have another budget board or BET meeting to discuss what supplemental is moving forward. We just unfortunately wouldn't be able to pay the invoice, so that's not the best way of handling it. But if we transferred those funds and move forward, those funds would be available, ready in order to pay whatever is decided upon tomorrow, and the detention center. Or we can just move the detention center's amount. But either way, we have to pay for team's invoice. So we're just going to have another budget board meeting, basically.
Does
Yeah.
the contract tomorrow, when it moves it to 6 months, does that shore it up with the original amounts that were contemplated, or is it just merely cutting the current contract in half?
It's merely cutting the current contract in half until we have enough time at September supplemental to discuss what their contract needs to look like as a whole moving forward. So there'll be a second amendment to the contract as to what we'll be paying team for the year. And that's what we needed to discuss in September supplemental.
I mean, I would just like to at least point out that this, kind of give an explanation on the reason why I voted the way I voted, was because to Mr. Warren's point, I'm really uncomfortable with backing into a number. But I also would like to say, I mean, one of my original jobs with the sheriff's office was diversion. I mean, I certainly didn't do it to the level that you did, but I worked with Hope, Red Rock, North Care team, actually. You know, I was on the hiring board with Judge Burton now, and Tanya Rubio Rosas to put Kimberly Byard in her current position. I was one that was, so I believe in that, but commensurate with that, I also am really concerned, to Commissioner Davidson's point, Mr. Warren's point, you know, I am really concerned about backing into a number. I mean, I would love to see the jail more empty, but I also want to be very mindful of the taxpayers' dollars and the original amounts that were potentially contemplated for that. I just want to provide that as at least a looking glass for where my vote was. It's not because I'm against diversion. I mean, I was probably the original diversion guy in Oklahoma County doing it all by myself. So,
Chris, I would invite you to the mic just to speak to what this would look like if we weren't able to provide you the invoices paid for your employees for July, August.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for the discussion. Like I'm a little bit perplexed because at the end of the day, we signed a contract and the county signed a contract. It's legally binding. And the contract is for $1.35 million for us to provide these services. It's signed, it's in place. When we were asked and agreed to provide this service, we were told this is the amount of money you have to provide it for this next year. Get to work. We went to work, we studied best practices, we staffed accordingly, and we've been providing those services since July 1st. Since July 1st. We have received exactly zero compensation for the services that we provided now. And I would also say that when a decision was made to give 4 employees to the detention center and 1 employee to the DA's office, we're all working together. But I'm telling you, it doesn't seem fair that they get their budget approved for 12 months, and here we are trying to defend taking these services to another level, and not even getting approved for 6 months. I mean, we were only doing what we were asked to do based on the contract that was signed by the county. I want to say to Mr. Freeman, like, had I known, and I apologize, like, I sincerely apologize, had I known that we were supposed to come make a presentation or get approval from this distinguished body before we signed that contract, I promise you I would have done that. I'm not trying to, I didn't know, and I take full responsibility for that. That will not happen in the future. I want you guys to know everything that's happening ahead of time. I want you to feel good about it. I want there to be 100% transparency. You can question us on anything in relation to our invoice. You can come see the service model in action. We want you to feel good about it. We want you to take ownership of it. We want you to be proud of it. So I'm just like, I don't know what we're going to do, because we've got people who have been working now for 2 months, and we're eating into our savings to try to make this happen.
I would also be remiss not to mention that team was really great and actually started the supervision and transferring of services well before we signed a contract, and they did that at no cost. So for
Just
how long? I don't, almost a month.
30 days, but I mean, like, we'd do it again. Like, we believe in this work. We see the value in what we're doing. I thought we were all on the same, after the same goals and same outcomes. And
It's not the goals.
and if we can, I would love the opportunity to stay the course so that we can get those jail numbers down, but also promote community safety simultaneously.
It's not the goals. It's not the outcomes. It's not your service. It's not your ability and the things that you do. I think everybody up here believes in that. Like Brandon, I created Shine under Commissioner Mont, one of the biggest, most successful diversion programs that Oklahoma County has. Now you're managing that, and it's still successful. So it's not the diversion that we don't believe in it. The problem is we're staring at a 700-pound gorilla, and you're asking for an increase of 25%. That's where the issue is. And we all walked into it thinking that we could do it for cheaper.
I'm only asking for the money that I signed the contract for.
I understand.
That's all I'm asking for. And I would also say conditional bond is so much more affordable than detainment in the detention center for folks who don't need to be there. This is a cost savings program.
And that I would speak to your question in regards to why we would fund the detention center for 12 months and the DA for 12 months, just for discussion here. Theirs was purely transferring employees from one department to the other. We're not paying for any additional services or software or incentives, things like that. That's purely salaries. And so to me, and I know, I mean, your salaries are $925,133. And again, I apologize to this board that you don't have this in front of you. And so when we're looking at, we're in a situation of not having enough funding, those are the things that we need to discuss further in September supplemental is how can we do that? Correct, Cody?
Well, I just want to address a couple things. So, and I agree with what you're saying, Brandon, on backing into the numbers. Ideally, that's not the way we would do it. When it was presented to BOCC, there was some moving targets, there was discussion, and then it was approved, and then the contract, the 1.3, was added based upon those conversations. But whenever I was looking at it and my concern about the expense, I didn't want to know that the court services budget that we had effective July 1 was, I think, $1.184 million. My concern wasn't that team's budget wasn't over the 1.184. My concern was to make sure that all of the mechanisms that we were going to be utilizing, which is the jail trust and the DA's office and team, would be not exceeding that 1.184, right? So I agree with what Mr. Speaker's saying here, I don't think it's necessarily fair to single them out versus the other two. I think we were under the impression that all three were going to fall underneath that dollar amount threshold. Okay. Now, what I was kind of mentioning earlier about needing to have this conversation, but today what it was about, the problem is we have a contract and we're obligated to team right now. So I think the intent from Commissioner Mon's office was to move this on onto this agenda so we can move the money into M&O so we could pay for those things that we've already received contractually so that we're not in breach of that contract. We have that money there so we can pay those invoices. There is a 30-day out in the contract. A team could get out if they wanted. The county can as well. But we would have the money there to pay for the invoices for the services that have already been rendered. And then we can engage in these conversations in BET, other meetings, whatever, as far as how we're going to lay out all three contracts. The other two may not change. They may be the same. I was under the assumption that, we only moved, I think, 3 employees actually over to the jail, that with them being short-staffed, not paying salaries for the full 320 people, that they might be able to absorb those 3 individuals into their payroll for, a few months or something. So that was kind of my consideration whenever I was looking at this as well. We didn't know that we were going to have an MOU with the trust when we entered into the agreement with Team. We didn't know that it was going to be like that. We thought that it was just going to transfer over and they were going to take them over for a while. And then down the road, if they did get fully staffed and they needed more salary dollars, we could look at doing a supplemental appropriation later. It turned out that the trust wanted an MOU and wanted money in association with that. So then we had that $145,000 on top of this. And then same thing with the DA's office. So it is really convoluted. I think the intent of Commissioner Mon's agenda item was just to get the money down into M&O so we could pay for the invoices that have already been received. No intention of just saying status quo, we're not going to look at making any changes moving forward, because we're going to have to. We're going to have more conversations, but it's just a way to get us to that next step. And so we can adhere to the contract that we're bound to right now. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Does the contract include the increase? Because we keep saying that we're trying to pay just the contract. So did we sign a contract knowing that we're going to spend more money than what the budget board approved? Did the commissioner sign
the contract that is in
So we
place?
signed a contract. The commissioner signed a contract approving to spend more money than what the budget board approved.
To be fair, there was no money approved,
Okay.
period.
I'm just trying to paint a picture in my
Yeah.
head and put some of
The-
these
the
dots together, because
contract-
there's a lot going
The
on here.
contract that BOCC approved was just north of 1.35 million. $1.3 million. It was just north of that.
Okay.
Yes. That is
But
what the
it's-
county is obligated to right now.
And Chris, that's the contract. That's your contract.
So
But
what,
the budget board, where,
Yeah. But I want to be
'Cause there's
sure,
still an
like you, I want to be
increase.
sure that we're not talking different contracts.
right,
So the
and
1.35 that you mentioned to us is that contract
It's-
that you're
it's the
discussing.
contract that's already in place right now.
that has an increase. And so I
Correct.
think, and I appreciate and understand why Commissioner Mon put this on. And if it was a normal transfer, then this wouldn't be this whole long discussion today. But because there is the increase, it has complicated it and I think made me very uncomfortable. I love the speaker. He's amazing, done amazing work. I think team's awesome. I'm totally for the deal. But this is a very uncomfortable situation this morning. And so I apologize. We do need to pay employees. But I am very uncomfortable with the situation, and I hope some things get worked out in different conversations and with the commissioners tomorrow, and maybe in a follow-up special BET meeting, just so we're all a little bit more comfortable with the situation. I mean, Commissioner Davidson is right. We've got to find pennies under the couch cushion to pay for a jail. I mean, we are all asking a lot of questions about how we're spending our money, which we should. I mean, that's our responsibility to do. So I'm for everything that you do. I'm so sorry you're stuck in this situation. We want to make sure that we keep our commitments. We want to make sure that people get paid. So I hope that this gets resolved quickly, but it's a very uncomfortable situation today.
Jody, my question was gonna be something along those lines, but so I think the first time this item came up on the BOCC agenda was probably April. Do you know why? I mean, I'm one who sits on the BET. That's why I'm asking. Do you know why it didn't come before the BET at that point to look at a possible increase in a way to identify the funding? Because I am a little confused at how we got to a point where there was a contract put in place that I do understand we don't necessarily see the transfers that go across BET. Obviously I get that, but what I am confused that if BET, I mean I take my job serious in BET much like you and just like all the other team members, and when I see a number that comes across for an amount, I take that as ironclad, and so that's why I made the vote the way I did back then. So I guess my question is what happens if we get to a point when we do go sit through BET during the September supplement and we can't find the money because of other things? I mean, I think that's when I say backing into a number, that's more so what I mean. It's not the number that scares me. It's what if we just physically can't find the money? Because I mean, last year we ended the year with, I mean, how many thousands of dollars? 7,000. I mean, and
I think
so
it was
or whatever,
17.
17,000.
No,
Right.
no,
No,
$17.00.
Okay, yeah. I was doing-
17.00.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, and it's
Yeah,
kind of,
no,
it's kind of funny, but
Yeah, and
literally,
Jessica,
that's where we're at.
correct me if you had a different interpretation, but I think we were on the same length here. In April and in May and in June, we thought that the total cost of the new program, outsourcing it versus having it in-house, was going to be less than what we had allocated for our own department to do it. So our thought was, what are we going to do in September with the excess money? Are we going to bolster that program or are we going to move it somewhere else? Right? That was what we thought. That's why it didn't go to BET to have discussions about increasing that budget. And it was a BOCC decision that they didn't want to have that department anymore. They just wanted to outsource it. And if it was going to be the same or less money, we just didn't move that down into M&O to be able to pay for it out of a contractual basis versus in-house, right? To your point about September supplement, if we can't find those dollars and we don't have any choice, then the Board of County Commissioners will have to exercise their ability to get out of that contract with a 30 days notice. So right now, we're obligated for the services that have already been rendered and for 30 days in the future, because it's a 30-day out language as long as those services are provided. So if we move this money, it doesn't mean that we can't if budget board tells BOCC we're not giving you extra money for this or whatever, those decisions can still be made outside of this particular meeting. This is just allowing the county to process an invoice that's for services that have already been rendered, not for anything into the future. What Jessica was saying about tomorrow's meeting, that contract, my understanding, I've not seen the contract, but is the same contract that the board already has in place. It's just cut in half so that there would be sufficient funds to encumber the entire contract. But just like any of the rest of our contracts that we encumber for the full year that have out language, we can still get out and then unencumber the money that hasn't been previously spent, right?
Mr. Friedman, do you think since we've already voted on this and have had a lot of discussion that we could move on to the agenda and maybe have a special meeting? Because I appreciate the information, but I also think we're sort of going in circles.
I totally agree with that. The problem, and in fact, the problem with trying to come back to it, and I see we do not have a DA representation, but the problem try to come back to it and redo anything on item 2, I'm not sure we can.
We have already taken the vote, sir. So.
And we have, and I don't think that we can maneuver it into another motion.
It just feels like we're trying to force a change I'm not sure what our goal is right now. I guess was kind of my question. I appreciate the conversation again, but we have taken the vote on this. And so unless we have a new motion, we need to move on so
And
we
that's
can
my-
all get
and that's
to
my
other
problem. I
important
don't think-
obligations today.
I don't think we can do a new motion on this item.
Okay, so then probably
That's
we
my
need to,
personal opinion. I
But-
don't know and I do not.
and
think
as
it-
the chairman, I'm
That-
looking to you to make a decision as to where we're going to go next so that we're not sitting here all day because I know we all have a
I
lot of
agree
different
with you.
things.
I agree
And
with you.
happy to do some follow-up conversations with team and others, but I don't know that we need to keep repeating.
I do want to bring up just one general comment. As you know, every single member of the budget board loves you. We've all worked with you most of our lives, and we understand you. You're an incredibly good leader and an incredibly good man. We do need to get these details worked out. To me, we obviously we got way, as with the county clerk just said, we got way off. The train's not on the tracks anymore, and it's going to be up to us to get it back on there. Personally, in my mind, we're starting with $1.35 million contract with you. And from there, we need to go. And equally more important, we've got the contractual because responsibilities. Now we got to pay the damn contract. So we will work on that. We will get this done. All right. So we've already voted on this. The motion's already been defeated. We're moving on to item number 3. Who's speaking to number 3?
Stacy's, right?
Who's speaking to number 3?
Where is Stacy?
We've gone through this before. Thank you, Chris.
Move to strike.
Oh, hold on. I can probably speak to it.
I don't think we need to strike this.
No, we can't strike it. So this is the transfer of appropriation from ARPA fund, the capital fund into M&O, not to exceed 229,000. Transfer is necessary to continue the Oklahoma Detention Center HVAC and life safety improvement project. We just need to transfer the funds so that way that can be paid.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
For sure. But
Number 4, I can speak to that as well unless Brandon would like to.
All right.
Yeah, so this is that's really kind of a standard transfer that you see at the end of the fiscal year for most departments. In this account, the fiscal year is on the federal fiscal year, so that's why it's being done now, and it's not coming through in May. So it's just shoring up salaries and benefits in our traffic safety account to pay our educators for their next month.
Okay, you've heard the discussion. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, citizens participation. Are there any citizens who would dare to participate? Seeing none, board comment. Start down here. Marcy.
Thank you.
Just to remind everybody, that is a contract that's in place. We will have to pay this contract, the obligated, for the work that has been done. If you wish to discuss anything further going forward after the work that has been done, so be it. But services have been rendered. We do have to pay for those services. We have to keep that in mind for team.
I've got no questions on that, at least in mine, and I have no other comments on it. I will say this once again goes back to if the Cody and the group had had the opportunity to kind of vet this and get some of these questions out, and then each of our individual members come back, it would have been a hell of a lot smoother. That's the only comment I had.
Yeah. My comment would be that I apologize that to team and to the elected officials here that we're having to have these discussions. But after BOCC, in regards to if the contract moves forward for 6 months, then we'll have to have another meeting, special budget board meeting in order to transfer these funds. So just want to make sure you're aware that we will have to call another special. And I thank you for your time today.
Thank you for the conversation. I do think it's a good, productive conversation, and I hope that not just with this contract, but with all contracts, that when appropriate, that the budget board is probably brought in a little bit earlier to help with these discussions.
I think once again, we do need to discuss things. I think we need to work together. That's what our job is to make sure the money is spent properly and to make sure everything is done. We don't need to back into numbers. We need to have the numbers up front and keep the faith with the county and the citizens of Oklahoma County.
One thing, Cassie, I apologize. Cassie had shared with me that we needed to receive a document for signature. Is that still something that we need to do?
It's just his signature. It does not have to go on the agenda as signed. We can always obtain those after.
Okay,
But
well-
no numbers have changed.
Okay.
That one is still the same. That was for the sheriff's office.
thank you. Sorry, I got stuck under my pile of papers.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Okay, got a motion and a second. We are adjourned.
Roll call vote.
Roll call vote, yeah. Jeez.